Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome, wherever you are from for this episode on Semantic Layers for Agentic AI. This is Pio Marola speaking, CEO and founder of ThinkWinkers. And today we have quite a topic to discuss. Well, it's such an important topic that this very morning I was by the seaside and I just left on purpose to run this session with you. As a matter of fact, I'm spending my summer here in Gargano. It's about 35 degrees and it's absolutely wonderful. And what about you? Where are you from? Where are you connecting from? And how hot it is? Because I've heard, regardless of whether you're in the south of Europe or the north, it's been quite a hot June. So drop a comment there. And by the way, whenever you have a question for us, don't hesitate to ask. We will take each and every single question and provide the best possible answer. After all, events like this are useful when we make sure that there is an ongoing debate and interaction between us. We can see that Natalia, of course, is on stage, is watching with us. Natalia is also going on holidays tomorrow, so also to Italy. But right now she's in Prague. Very hot there as well. Now, what are we going to talk about today? Well, agentic AI is a topic that for the last 2 years has been talked about, explored, a lot of money has been invested in it. But the reality of it is many organizations embraced it as if it was, something like magic, without looking at the context surrounding it, without looking at the data that enables its success of agentic AI. So today I have two guests that will talk exactly about context, the importance of a semantic layer. We have Yerevan with us as well, Mirna. We have India, 40 degrees Celsius, I get you. And we have Luda as well. And therefore, with the two guests of today, Wouter Mertens and Tamás, we will talk about why semantic layers matter, why context matter, and what are the things that companies need to do in order to succeed with agentic AI. Now, without any further ado, let me invite on stage Wouter and Tamás.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Calling in from a hot Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing fine.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Very good. 33 degrees in Prague, so it's getting hotter.
Indeed, indeed. Very good. For those in the audience that don't know you yet, tell us something about yourself.
I'm Wouter Mertens, 8 years at Collibra. I'm currently the field CTO for AI governance at Collibra. I've been working in Collibra in engineering and in product management. And before that, I was actually a CTO in a Belgian fintech. And I was working as an architect and manager in a few broadcast companies here in Belgium.
Hello, my name is Tamás Kuczik. I work as a consultant at PwC, focused on data and AI governance. So in practice, it means we are helping companies to make sure that the data they are feeding to AI, they are well-defined, trustworthy, and well-governed. Previously, I worked at the vendor side, not exactly in Collibra, but I was working with the data governance platform where I was a product owner of some of these capabilities, which we will maybe talk about today as well. So nice to meet you all.
Excellent. And, we start already talking about data from the get-go. And because my very first question would be, and observation would be that, agentic AI leaves a lot to be desired. Many organizations invest in millions and millions and millions and millions. And so I would like to ask you, given your experience and background, why is that? Why there are no tangible results, or at least they are not the norm? And, essentially, what is missing there?
Let me kick it off. I think there are two dimensions that we need to take in consideration. Well, the first one is kind of like, we see that not every idea, not every project justifies for AI or justifies for an agent. So not everything that you try to do with agents will come to a success. It's kind of like a funnel. You have a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, but when you walk them through and you try some stuff out, sometimes you realize, actually, this can be probably the better done with some normal code than with an agentic AI. If you then slim down to those that really make a difference, I think that's the second dimension. A lot of enterprises, a lot of companies realize that you need to have confidence. You need to have trust that the AI is solving the problem that you're looking for and is solving the problem repeatedly. And that requires very good accuracy. That requires very good data. That requires good checks and balances. That requires guardrails. That requires quite a lot to achieve that level of success and predictability, controlled success that you're looking for with agentic. So I think people kind of underestimate how much effort there is in ideation and in development and governance before you can put it into production. And over time, it will catch up. But right now, I think a lot of agentic AI is suffering from a funnel over those two dimensions.
Perfect. I would just maybe build on that a bit. I would add what we see actually at clients. So most of the pilots on AI or the demos are built on handpicked data, right? So they are, explained to the model, and when you try to scale it across the organization, these agents basically stall, because then you show the agent quite a huge amount of data it doesn't understand. So I would say that rarely the technology is the blocker, but the main blocker can be the organization that never agreed on the shared meaning of the data. So if you uncover a lot of data for your agent, it doesn't understand. It's basically like onboarding a new employee on the first day without giving him the guardrails, giving him the glossary, and giving him the explanation on what he should do. So I would say that it's very important to build on the context and the knowledge layer and the semantics we will talk about today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the problem and the challenges that the companies already have in data, they're just amplified tenfold when you're just throwing agentic AI in it. I mean, all the issues about accountability of data or silos and so on and so forth. I mean, it's not like you throw an agent in the middle of it and all of a sudden everything falls in order. So I very much agree with you there that there's a lot of work that needs to go into deploying AI agents and make them do the stuff that they do best. If you're just throwing them in and it's a mess, I mean, what can you expect after all? And tell me a little bit more about context, really, because we're just starting to touch upon it. Why does it matter so much, and why, whenever there's a lack of context, then the results are just poor, or there are, even risks possibly connected to it?
Wouter.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The context, literally, context is literally what you type in the prompt of a ChatGPT or a Claude or any of those large language models that you know. And when you're dealing with agents or you're dealing with large AI use cases or AI projects, you have to type a lot to make that AI, that large language model, understand not only the data or the APIs or the tools that it has access to, but also how it operates. And you need to give it a more broader window of, these are the things I want you to think about, these are the things you can use, these are the things you should use. And that is super important for the AI to kind of make sense of the data and the tools it has access to. So it just on itself is not good enough. And I think a lot of people have these examples of, I'm asking something on ChatGPT and it just goes off to something it found on the web. And then you have to refine your search, or you refine your objectives closer and closer. And that's all context. We have the same thing with data, where on itself, data is already valuable. It should be correct. It should be high quality data. But then again, you also need to think about, what does it really mean if there is a word in there that you don't understand? You can't just search on the internet for a metric or a KPI, because you get a very generic definition. In a company or an organization, it can be very specific. So you need to have a glossary next to it. You need to have semantic meaning. You need to have relationships and verbs between different correlations, between different lines of businesses. If this is in marketing or this is in HR, it could mean completely different items. So you need to know where it operates within your organization. And all of those items really drive for more value. We at Collibra did a test with this, where we asked the university to try a certain use case, search use case, with and without context. And we realized, or the university kind of proved, that by adding additional context of semantics and glossary and understanding of the data, the AI became 30% more accurate. So that's a big improvement, not only in your value statement, but also in your efficiency to quickly identify, as we said before with ideation to development. You can quickly identify, will I be ever very valuable? Will this be ever accurate enough for me to really trust the AI? And so these improvements are super, super important to take into consideration.
Exactly, and I would maybe build again on a practical example from a client. So we did a similar test where we basically, when the business came after us, we are supporting that client with building the semantic layer and the data catalog and the data governance practice around. And the business came after us, and they said that our agents are giving us very bad results. Then we can argue later maybe what is a bad result and what is a hallucination. But of course, we did the same experiment where we basically connected it to the data source, and then we connected it to the data source and also the data catalog, where the semantic layer and the context and the business meaning is living. And basically the results were much better, and the business was very satisfied with that. And one thing maybe on hallucination specifically, I would like to mention that maybe in many of the times it's not basically a hallucination, it's just the model trying to fill the gap that the context should fill, right? So sometimes, the model is just trying the best to fill in the gap that is not there, so it doesn't understand the meaning, and then it comes up with something that is not maybe accurate enough, and it's not, custom and specific to your company because you didn't provide it. And that's the reason maybe there are some of these bad results or hallucinations, we can call them.
Definitely. And which I think brings us to another point, which is, whenever I hear about people's reception to agentic AI, there is a mix of feelings, right? Some people are thinking that their organization are implementing or doing agentic AI just to replace them, and some do. Okay, some of them are confused about it because there is a lot of PR that goes left and right. Autonomous enterprises that won't really need much use of people, much people for that. So I would like to ask you, given that AI agents have the context, a company does it correctly, where do people fit in? How can they still provide an edge within this discussion?
Maybe I can start with this one. So I would say that most of the knowledge within an organization isn't in the databases, in the structured databases at all, right? So it lives in Slack, it lives in Teams, in Confluence, in wiki pages, or maybe in some people's heads. And that's why behind the decisions, you always need some human. Human, I think they are much more better than AI in reading in the unstructured and messy, swamp of information and the history of your company that maybe AI can't really do or can't really sense this. And also human can know things that are not written down. So, again, it's some institutional memory or some judgment. So I would say that, encoding that knowledge and maybe putting it down into some machine type of format and providing it to the AI can help the AI in the future. But it's still I would say that we are quite far away from that. I know that maybe Wouter can talk a bit about how Collibra approaches unstructured data governance and unstructured data in general. But I would say that still in this place, the human knowledge is quite better or quite advanced to those LLMs and other models.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Yes. I had a customer actually telling me this. Like he compares it like if we humans need to accomplish a task and we don't know how to do it, we have a network in our organization to rely on, ask people, and we know who to ask. An agent can't do that. Or an agent, you should tell him to come to you to ask you that question if he doesn't know it. And like you said, Tamás, in the previous answer, maybe an agent will first try to fill the gap automatically before asking it. At Collibra, we indeed recognize this. Like you said, like there's a lot of knowledge living out there in unstructured information, which could be a Confluence, which could be an intranet, which is a lot in Slack, Teams, Messenger platforms like that. We have a solution for that called our unstructured AI or DZ Lab solution that indeed catalogs those items and categorizes them. So it introspects that element and creates tags and classifications around it so that you know what is where and where you can use it. That does not mean that it's a bulletproof solution, because it can still contain wrong answers. It's not because people are chatting on Slack about it that it actually is the truth, but it gives the agent at least a little bit more of an edge on finding out what people were talking about, in which direction he or she, I don't know, it should search for. I think that is really an add to it. I think one other thing from a governance perspective, and this is where we see a lot of customers of Collibra really operating, is the human in the loop, or as we call it now at scale, the human over the loop. If you want to have trust in an agentic world, you need to have some kind of validation or some kind of way for people to validate, is this AI, is this agent being developed and approved in my organization in a proper way? Did somebody say, yes, this one is okay to put in production, this one is okay to do? Yes, we went through the full process of validating the data was right, the model is right, we did some tests, the code around it is right, the context is set right, the semantic that it consumes is right. We have evals to validate whether or not it's going to go bias or hallucinating or have data drift or those kind of things. You want to validate that in a governance environment. You want to have this kind of oversight where you can say, like, I'm going to look it up, I'm going to see it, I'm going to see that green checkbox next to it saying, okay, this is an agent that is running to our company standards, to our quality levels. That is also going to be super important, and you probably need humans to kind of put the final stamp on those items. Agents controlling agents, yes, as long as there is a human managing by exception, for instance. That could be a place where humans still need to be involved.
We have a question, but before I ask you this question, do you think it's more about human in the loop or human over, or it's more like a human at the steering wheel?
I would say from PwC's perspective, it's very important to own the risk and the accountability over what the agent can do, right? So it's not just about what the agent is doing. So it's not just about what the agent can do, because these agents in the future will probably do a lot of things. But the question is, who is accountable when the agent does something, right? So some human should own the risk and the accountability for what the agent is performing and what it is doing, what answers it is doing, what are the guardrails within those it is working and performing tasks. So I think ownership, so it's basically the steering wheel, I would say, more of that.
Yeah, but the problem there is, does it scale? I think you're right about ownership, absolutely right. But does it scale in a sense that if you have a few thousand agents running around, how can you be aware all the time? On a certain moment, you have to let go. I was in San Francisco at the Databricks conference last week, and you see those Waymos driving around in San Francisco, cars without anybody at the steering wheel, just to take that analogy. But there's very clear accountability. If you hit that car or the car hits something, the accountable is really true. But there's not somebody really in the car driving the car. I kind of feel like it's a little bit the same. I'm absolutely agreeing. It's the accountability and the ownership that is the key element. And preferably you have somebody watching very closely. But at scale, on a certain moment, you kind of have to let go and find out another way of controlling, validating your accountability all the time. And I think we're not there yet. I think we're looking at some technologies to do this, but right now, going back to the first question you asked, Pio, I think more and more companies are looking for context to have agentic value. I think a next step would probably be, how do I now that I have a few thousand agents with value, with good context, with good semantics, really understanding our business, how do I now ensure that they operate with a level of control and accountability that is manageable for me?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how this topic evolves over time.
Yeah.
So I have a question here. Are organizations in the UK and Central and Eastern Europe facing similar challenges, or do you see different levels of AI maturity across the regions?
Well, I would say, since I'm operating in CEE, so in Central and Eastern Europe, I would say that the big companies here are mainly owned by some Western mother companies, and basically they're already dealing with this. So the clients here in Czech Republic, some of them are very advanced, some of them are already looking into the semantics, and they are also looking into the AI first approach, right? And this is coming back to the previous question and answer from Wouter. How do we govern and how do we ensure that when agents are communicating between each other, who is basically doing the oversight, who is doing the governance about them? And I can maybe share some example that's maybe more of an experimental one, and it's similar to what Wouter described. So we looked into an agentic environment and we tried to make an agent who was the governance agent, basically. So we fed him some policies and standards. So for example, a data governance or a master data governance, what was in the company, we fed it to the agent. It built up some rules. So basically, it translated it to some instructions, and then it was operating all around the other agents, and it was checking those rules when those agents were performing some tasks or changing some information between each other. So, those tasks, for example, were looking at the quality of the data, at the source of the data, for example, at the documentation and the metadata, whether there was a clear ownership around the data they were sharing between each other, and all those things. So I would say that they are, companies here are facing similar problems as well. I think it's very, because they realize that many of their pilots or demos or maybe their AI efforts failed because they didn't have this background built around it. So
we operate across the world, and to be honest, I think from a level of AI maturity, we kind of see everybody doing the same. The topic of semantic, for instance, the topic of context. How do I give context? How do I govern context? How do I build context? Because let's face it, it's not something you just pull up from thin air. That all on itself is hard work. All those topics are relevant across the world. I would say AI maturity is probably always the same. The risk appetite, that differs. EU AI Act here in Europe forces some people to operate. In America, you have NIST. But in the US, the attitude towards that one is a little bit different. The regulatory framework is much more a guidance framework. and much less an obligation framework as it is considered more in Europe. So those things, GDPR, for instance, also still applies in Europe very strongly. You're dealing with data, you're dealing with potential data exposure. Those things in Europe, people are aware or more concerned around. But that's more implementation. I would guess that AI maturity and the objective to use AI or agentic AI inside organizations, I see it everywhere at the same high pace and high concern, top of the line, top of the priority list in most of the organizations that we work with.
Very interesting. And do you think that companies in Europe, because they're familiar with legislations like GDPR and so on, they might be a little bit more ready than the one in the US when it comes to data security and privacy and so on, and therefore they might surprisingly go faster in the beginning?
Actually, I wouldn't say that. I understand where you're coming from a compliance point of view, but actually in the US, if you have incidents like you're selling cars for $1 or your AI starts reimbursing flight tickets, your legal obligations or your legal consequences with the law firms could be very strong. So actually, when it comes down to data security or security breaches or AI going rogue, both across the world, everybody's concerned. It's that point of actually to the point that I think great use cases are not getting into production because of I'm scared that it will do something wrong. And it's not because you've been testing 10,000 times and it was always right, that the 10,001 time it's not going to go wrong. There is a level of unpredictability, natural and baked into AI that is giving people a little bit of a concern, definitely for public-facing artificial and agents. I think internally, I see it like Copilot Studio is used tremendously in a lot of organizations, and there are a lot of agents being used internally. Be it that the value of those agents is also a little bit less. It's a little bit more automation of humans, individuals in their daily job. It's less a company-wide initiative to really bring value to a business process that the company really owns.
I would maybe just a little bit talk about those regulations. So, we in Europe like to say that the regulations help to, push innovation. And me as a data governance person, we always use those regulations as, let's say, the accelerator for data governance or the business case for data governance. I'm not saying it always worked, but you have these GDPR regulations, you have these industry-specific regulations like BCBS, like Basel, and all the other specific ones like the ESG regulations, for example. But I would still say that this wasn't really the real business case for data governance, but I would say that now with the AI and with the need for that context for the AI, I think that is the real business case that will fund data governance programs within those companies. Because, sometimes before it was hard to, get the funding in those companies for data governance because it's not something nice and shiny like a report or like some machine learning model or something. But now when the companies, I think they are slowly realizing that without proper data governance and proper data documentation, data quality, and all the other topics within this world, they will not have, value from AI. So I think that's an important thing to mention here.
Totally agree. And actually, this actually also applies like data governance for your semantic layer. Your semantic layer is going to be a data element. Yeah. It's going to be a knowledge graph. That knowledge graph needs to be consistent, needs to be well governed, needs to be correct, because your agents are accessing it continuously and probably at high volumes. As soon as you have one error in there, that can proliferate really quickly into a lot of agents going, and that will again then give you lack of confidence. Like, how is this possible? How did this happen? So your knowledge graph, your semantic layer, your contextual layer will become a single point of failure. You need to make sure that it's, of course, available from an IT perspective, secure, You don't want anybody else in there or adding stuff in there that is not correct or causing drift. But you also want to be on governance and quality measurements there to make sure that it is consistent, it is correct, it really represents the real world. It is how you represent your business to this, let's say, a collection of agents. So I totally agree. Data governance AI is the business case, is becoming the business case of data governance. And AI on itself, its business case is the value that you bring for your company, which could be time to market, which could be efficiency, which could be I don't know, a lot of even intellectual property could be a business case for AI.
Absolutely. I think we might be entering like a golden age for data governance, data management, exactly for this reason. There's never been such a big driver for investing in it as there is now. Because yes, there are regulations, there is compliance, but no one really has a lot of fun doing that, you know? It's like more perceived as an obstacle than an actual driver for business growth. But when it comes to AI, I remember there was an initial period in which everyone forgot about data and jumped in the AI hype train. But come on, everyone knew back then, if you know something about data, everyone knew back then that it was just a matter of time before companies would realize, oops, we skipped the most important part. No governance in data, no governance in AI, complete mess. You know? So yeah, I fully agree with your point there.
And we now see a lot of companies skipping this moment of no governance on my semantic layer, no governance on my context. Every individual data engineer, data scientist is adding their own proprietary context to their own little agents. And you lose that oversight again, and you don't know what is given to you. You can't pull it out later. You can't say like, oh, sorry, that was wrong. Let me reverse back on that one. It's in there, and you will see agents going bad, and you have to redo your work all over again. We already noticed this with customers that are complaining about tokens being lost on agents that are actually promising in the beginning, but then ungoverned data and ungoverned context gave the agent the wrong backbone to make its decisions on. And in the end, you have to now stop it and redo all your work and start over again. The only benefit that you then have is, should I redo it or not? Because you have your ideation phase of, is this potentially valuable? So you know where to put your money down, you know where to invest. Agents that are shared among 10,000 employees are probably very valuable. Agents that are only living with one employee might be something you don't want to invest again. But the governance of the context, the governance of the semantic layer is definitely rising, and is going to be super important in 2026, 2027 to set up and to start managing.
And maybe just continue on this one a bit, because you mentioned, the use case and the ideation phase. And what we see at companies is that, the board or the management is pushing AI for everything, basically. And, they skip, or they do very quickly this ideation phase, and then they end up, with use cases they don't really have value. So our recommendation, or how we work with clients usually, is that we say that you have to pick a narrow use case that has a real value and a real, impact for your organization. And don't start with the agent, don't start with the technology, just, focus on the use case. Then you move on to the data. Then you see whether you have the data to provide to this agent. You have, for example, the meaning of the data, the ownership, the context, what we are talking about, and then, defining boundaries, and then, implementing it within some technology. So of course you then need to also look at some of the risks, and that's important. But what we really see is that there is a very big hype and push, maybe because some of the people have the KPIs and they want AI now, and they want AI for everything, and we don't think it's a good approach for this.
Yes. And starting with the technology rather than the business case has always been the problem with technology. I mean, in data management, data quality, that's exactly the same thing. You look for the technology before understanding what you're trying to do, having unrealistic expectations about whether a data project is going to yield any results and for what, and a data strategy being completely decoupled from a business strategy. So that's always been the problem with new technology or with technology in general. And with AI, again, that's an even bigger thing. And I think also companies should remember that it's not like you have an AI agent, the AI agent makes a mistake and someone can say, it was the agent, it wasn't me. There's a matter of accountability there that matters even more when you have tens of thousands of agents running around. So it's very important to get started and do things properly from the get-go, from the objective, from the business objective and business case, to the data, to the technology. And just as you mentioned, Tamás. Very good. Let's look also at another aspect, because now we're talking a little bit about the future too, right? You talked about 2026, 2027. So what do you think would be what will be the difference between the companies that made it and brought success with agentic AI and the companies that did it, that didn't? Of course, you mentioned context, semantic layer, business case. Is there anything else you could share looking into the next 2-3 years?
Well, I would say, and this is a very emerging topic in our practice, and I know Collibra is doing a very good job in this one, is basically looking into the governance of unstructured data, because that's a huge gap maybe, and data governance for now was focusing a lot on the structured data. And we are still not there, governing structured data in the companies. And now with the AI, we need to govern also unstructured data. And I would say that's even harder, and it's a bigger task, a bigger mountain to climb. But I think it's very important because, most of the AI agents now are not really built on structured data. They are, feeding, and they are getting information from documents, from, policy standards, or some, manuals and so on. So I would say it's very important to look into this topic. And I think Wouter can say a lot more about this, how they approach it in Collibra.
Totally agree. As agents are replacing humans and business processes in organizations, a lot of those business processes are fueled by files, folders, data that is living around in the org. And this is one of the reasons why Collibra last year did the acquisition of DZ Labs, to have that capability also in our portfolio, to really allow our customers to bring structure to or bring intelligence into the unstructured data. If you look 2 years, first of all, it's difficult to look 2-3 years ahead. It's changing so rapidly, so quickly. It's a little bit hard to distinguish. What I often do is I look at the big cloud platforms, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Databricks, Snowflake, SAP, and Salesforce, for instance, just to look at what they're doing. Because they're probably a little bit ahead of the curve, and their indication is very clear. And I see a lot of them, when we talk about agentic and when we talk about context, investing heavily in what they call a harness around your agents. Like everything what is not the model. The model is kind of settled in stone. We have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, we have Google with the Gemini, you have Meta with Llamas, you have Mistral here in Europe. But it starts to be very clear that there is a group of winners when it comes down to large language models and maybe the derivatives of the small language models associated with that one. But the harness around it starts to be the super most important thing for Microsoft, for a Google, for a Databricks. Harness consists of context. It consists of the data, structured and unstructured. But it also consists of the policies, the guardrails, the contracts, all the other stuff that you want to feed into that agent so it operates within your controlled environment. And I think that the capability of an organization to build out efficiently and effectively a harness that allows you to create agents at scale with a certain level of control and a level of confidence and trust that the agent will operate correctly, I think that will be a very important velocity element. And I think companies that can execute with velocity on the agentic space, because technology is there, to your point that you made, Pio, technology is already there. I think that will be one thing where we look in 2 years back, where we say, why did that company succeed and that company failed? Because that company had that structure in place, just like Tamás explained, with start with the business case, go over your development, make sure that you do everything in the right steps, so that in the end, you have something that can be deployed and can be valuable. And if you have this at a structural level inside your org, inside your enterprise, you would probably be capable of deploying valuable AI agents and AI use cases in general at scale, and that will be a differentiating element. That will give you cost efficiencies, that will give you time to market efficiencies, that will give you quicker iterations over. It becomes a flywheel of product innovation for you and your organization to make a difference compared to your competitors.
And I guess this is something that companies should start working on now.
Yeah.
Really, in order to be ready.
Mm-hmm. I think right now you'll see the evolution of the big AI platforms to cater to, hey, how do I get context in here? How do I do accountability? How do I integrate with a software like Collibra to have my data governance there, but also my AI governance there? How do I get that knowledge of unstructured inside my platform? Yeah, I think a lot of those companies are investing heavily in building out a stack, often very platform specific, of course, all the time platform specific, but building out that stack of, can I have all of those elements in place so that the agent layer in my platform can operate with confidence and with velocity on all of those elements? Yes.
Okay, this sounds very interesting, because one of the pushbacks about investing in AI in some organizations can be that there are new models and new releases happening so quickly that you don't know what you invest on, right? But I like this approach, because you're essentially saying we're building something that is useful, whatever comes tomorrow, and then allows us to embrace whatever new capabilities appear tomorrow, whatever new technology comes up. Because I think we all remember when AI became the talk of the room, let's say, how there were job titles like prompt engineers for 350,000 euros a year, and new job titles popping up and disappearing one day later. So this seems to me like the thing that allows you to embrace whatever comes later, something more permanent in a way, and that enables more, almost like a springboard for whatever new thing comes later, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it gives you a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Where you can start out, and maybe that's also what we need right now after 2 years of, I'm not going to say exotic, but at least high-paced evolutions and chaos. That solid foundation would really be something that companies can now rebase on, and then take their next leap forward. I think at PwC, that must be something that you guys guide your customers with.
Of course, and I would just like to point out the risks connected with that one. So, when you have this harness, which can maybe guide the prompt to the proper model, because, it has some, token optimization within it. It selects which model is the best to answer or to perform this task. Then again, you come back to the risks and the things we discussed before. And these are the boundary risks. How do you set up in this environment the boundary risks? So whether you have all the models allowed to perform such a type of a task or not, whether you can just guide it to one of the models and not the other one. How do you set it up? How does it work at scale, of course? And of course, then again, there is the interpretation risk. So you can guide the same task to different models and they can give you a different answer, and then you need to build something that will basically somehow aggregate the answers, somehow compare the answers and give you the one good answer or the one correct answer, so you don't end up with different interpretation, different numbers in the end. So I think there is a lot of in this governance and risk part, and I think it's a very interesting future we are looking ahead, and this will be very, very interesting topics to tackle in the next years within all the organizations. So
Indeed,
yeah.
indeed. Okay, we have a couple of questions here. What are the important steps to implement AI governance if you had to explain simply to a board?
Starts with data. Starts with data governance. Tamás already brought that up. So you have to know your data. You have to understand your data. It starts with the data quality. Like the data needs to be relevant, fit for purpose, high quality. You don't want to have data that has, for instance, 10,000 fake records in there or something like that. Second, then it starts with that context and that semantic layer.
Yeah.
Adding that additional element to it. And thirdly, I would argue if you want to explain to your XCOM what you need to do with AI governance, it's also a business process of governance. Like you have to go to a governance process. Who's accountable? Who owns this? Did we do a risk management assessment or something like that? Do we have a risk level indication? Do we have guardrails in place? How do they look like? Are they specific to this use case? Are they generic, just inherited from the company? It's not about making the right decision on those things. It's more about formalizing that at least you've done it. So I think that would be for me the three step approach that I would do.
I would just maybe add one point, and it is, once it is set up, you have to monitor and adjust. So it's not just, you set it up and then you forget, because, business changes, your processes might change, data can change. And I think it's really important to have this continuous monitoring and adjustment based on the changes that might happen. So I think that's also important to not forget.
Yeah, totally.
Very good. Very good. Now let me ask you. We met earlier on this year, and I had the pleasure to listen to a discussion about semantic layers in practice and how it brings results through a case study that you shared with us. I'd like also the audience to get an idea and a sense. So if you could share an example of a client, a company that you've worked with, where the semantic layer for Agentic AI really made a difference practically.
Yeah, I can give one example. It's a client from Czech Republic, and I already mentioned it a bit, but we can maybe deeper.
Yeah.
So we did the testing. So basically, the agent they are building is for business users when they want to, get the data from the data platforms. They need to write SQL codes, right? And not all business users know that. So basically, when they prompt the agent generates the SQL prompt or the query. And we tried it just with the data connected to the data source. But if you connect it just to the data source, many times the agent ends up with some columns that are named with some abbreviations, with some codes nobody understands. So the agent again can just guess maybe, or just to fill in the gap and try the best to understand what this column means based on the data it can find within it. Sometimes it works, sometimes maybe not. But then again, we connected it to the data catalog. Actually, it was Collibra in this case, where the business users and the people who understand the data described it with human language. So if I had the abbreviation code for a column, under it there was the business definition. And when the agent got this business definition, then basically the SQL query was much more accurate, because it knew, for example, that what revenue to look into, how was this revenue calculated, and for example, it knew for what department was this, revenue or revenue column requested, because, for example, revenue can be something different in finance and sales, right? So when you had just the abbreviation in the column, it didn't know, but when there was the explanation, so a specific department specific explanation, then it knew which column to take and prepare the SQL query for the business user, and then the business user was allowed to basically do its task, to perform some analytics and so on. So that's an example from here.
Very good.
We see a lot of those examples. I guess one of the things we do a lot is we have an MCP server. So the MCP protocol allows agents to consult Collibra. We see a lot of our customers using it, experimenting with it, but also using it already. And one of the examples we use internally, or we see a lot of our customers using it, is using Cloud Desktop or the Cloud client. Connecting over the MCP to Collibra to indeed understand the data better. Just to give the agent access to the context that is in Collibra around your data, so that it understands, for instance, indeed, this belongs to HR. Maybe I should have an extra policy here telling me what I can do with this data, compared to data that is maybe supply chain information, which is less critical and can be really consumed directly. Those things come from that context of I understand now where the data belongs in my semantics of my organization, and I can now retrieve that information and optimize that experience.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, we're approaching the end of the hour. So we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the present, the future, how, what can companies do really to gain an edge in this time where everyone is basically trying to bring business results with agentic AI. But of course, 1 hour is not enough to cover everything, which is why I would like to ask you, what's the best way for the audience with us to reach out to you, to ask your question, to connect with you? What would be the best way?
For me, LinkedIn is definitely an opportunity, but of course, you can always contact Collibra directly over the website or through our channel partners. And we're happy to discuss. This is for us our bread and butter. We are a data and AI governance company, and we're investing heavily in context, equally from a context engine as from a context building point of view. Those are our top priorities. AI governance, if I have to mention 3 top priorities. So we're really trying to already make a difference in 2026, not 2027.
Yeah, for me also LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me here. And of course, PwC is, I think, present in most of the countries. So if you want to go deeper in some of the, or if you have any use cases you want to discuss or get the support on something, feel free to contact. And if you are in the Czech Republic, we might maybe be connected in live on those topics. So.
Excellent. Well, I advise everyone to ask more questions, by the way. The event will stay online. So if you missed it and you're watching it later, ask questions. I'm sure that Wouter and Tamás will answer to them afterwards. And well, we should definitely do it again. It was a really interesting conversation. We should also do it again because I want to see how the conversation shapes in 6 months from now, let's say. So, great talk. Thanks a lot for coming. And until next time, then.
Yes, indeed. Until next time. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for having us.